In this small studio at the Museum of Radio and Television.
In the Ralph Guild radio studio.
In fact, we should ask him who Ralph Guild is. We will. Leonard Maltin joins us again on the program. He's going to be playing the incredible role of the lovely as well as talented Announcer One today in the rebroadcast of War of the Worlds.
Good morning, Announcer One.
Good morning, Mark and Brian.
Check it out. He's been working on it. Now, who's Ralph Guild?
I don't know.
My God, we're broadcasting in a man's studio.
But he's probably a very generous donor.
Probably. Or the guy
who's
who...
lovely that he donated this room.
Donator, or maybe he carpeted the room.
Maybe, possibly. Yes.
Hey, can you stick my name up there? Now, Leonard, we have known you for a lot of years. Leonard, of course, Entertainment Tonight. He's not really a critic. You're a reviewer, I guess.
You could say that.
A film expert.
Okay. Now, his video guides and so forth we've dealt with over the years, but he is also...
And I have the new ones for you, by the way. If you were wondering, the new video guides are out. I have brought copies
Thank you,
for
sir,
today.
because you always add.
Now, how much of a coincidence was this? Is this just out now? This book?
This new book that you're holding in your hands is just out last week.
One of his passions, we found out, one of Leonard's passions is the old radio broadcasts of the 40s radio theater, where they would do exactly what we're going to try to do today. Actors would come in, take the script, sound effects, and Foley live on the set, and you would present Mystery Theater or whatever the case may be. What we're attempting today, as we found out as we got into it, Leonard, is a huge undertaking.
Well, of course it is, especially since it's not something you do every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say it wasn't a big undertaking then, but then, of course, it was their daily bread and butter. That's how they operated. And so, the systems were in place to such a degree that the actors in those days would often do, and I know this sounds incredible, but they would do as many as 4 or 5 different shows a day. Someone like William Conrad. Now, William Conrad, people remember from, Jake and the Fat Man and Cannon on TV, but of course, he was one of the primary West Coast radio actors, actor for hire. His most famous part on radio was when he starred on Gunsmoke. He was Matt Dillon on the original radio show of Gunsmoke for 9 years, and he was fabulous.
Imagine the size of that gun belt.
And, well, of course, that's the thing about radio.
Right,
radio didn't matter what you looked like. I interviewed 100 people for this book, and I covered everything, comedy like the Jack Benny Show, to the suspense shows and all of that and everything in between. What actors loved about radio was it didn't matter what you looked like. If you could have the face of a character actor, but if you could play a leading man with your voice, you could be a leading man.
Sure.
And the same with the women. And sometimes, they got to do parts that they would never, ever be cast in a stage play or on television or in a movie to portray.
Leonard, tell us about what we're going to be attempting today. We're very excited about doing this, the War of the Worlds, and this happened 59 years ago?
On Halloween Eve. Now, Orson Welles was one of the real... Well, he built one of the pillars of radio drama, because when radio came along, it was experimented with in the late teens, and then the early 20s is when it really started to happen. And it hit America the same way, say, the Internet is capturing people today. And originally, radio was considered like a hobby. And the whole deal was you could build your own crystal set, or you could go out and buy a ready-made radio. And the big excitement was, hey, I just heard Des Moines.
Right.
It was how far a radio signal would travel was the big excitement. And late at night, people would sit there with their dials trying to tune in some distant station, and that was big excitement.
Either that or they'd watch TV.
And then as the local stations started establishing themselves, well, they had to put some programming on the air. And so what would they do? Well, all right, they'd get local musicians to come in and play 15 minutes of piano music. And then they'd have a local singer do 15 minutes of songs. And then they'd have maybe the guy come in and do the local farm and grain report, depending on the station and the city and the location. Finally got a little more professional. And then in 1925 or 26, I think, NBC went on the air. The idea of banding together a whole group of stations using telephone lines to create a network. And that way they could afford to hire big-name talent. They could have got stars from Broadway, stars from vaudeville to come on and appear on
Real
the radio.
talent.
Real talent, and not just amateurs and not just anybody who happened to drop by the studio. And eventually somebody said, well, let's try doing some plays on radio. And they had to sort of feel their way. After all, what do you do in a play? You have scenery. Oh, that's out. You have curtains. You have, lights. You have costumes. You have makeup. All of that is gone. They had to invent a new way to tell a story. And along the years as they were doing that, one of the people who really was an innovator was Orson Welles. He was very young. He was barely out of his teens, but he'd already had theater experience. He was a very precocious kid. And he'd been doing great things on Broadway. And he had named his troupe the Mercury Theater. CBS had an hour to fill on Sunday night. No sponsor had bought the hour, and so they gave it to Orson Welles. Say, here, do whatever you want. Do the classics. It's yours. An hour every week. And his producing partner was John Houseman, whom people will remember from his later acting career.
Sure.
And they would start every week, and they ran very loosely, and every week they tried to think of something to do. They did Dracula, they did Wuthering Heights, they did all sorts of classic plays, Treasure Island, Les Miserables. And one week they decided to do H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. But in the way that Wells would often do, they wanted to do a twist. They wanted to do something different with it, not just a straight rendering of the way Wells wrote it. H.G., that is. So someone came up with this idea. Howard Koch, a very talented writer, who later was one of the screenwriters of Casablanca, by the way, he fashioned this script, and the idea was to try to do it as a reality broadcast, as if you were really tuned in. Now, at the beginning of the show, because the original tape exists, you can buy it at a local bookstore, you know. It says, Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater present H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. It says so right there at the top.
Very clearly.
But because the show didn't have a sponsor, there were no commercials. So it went for 1 hour continuously. So if people tuned in after that opening announcement, they got hooked. And a lot of them got fooled. And by the time the hour was up, by the time they had, before they left the studio, now remember it's a Sunday night, so it's not daytime when there's business being transacted, but there was somebody on the switchboard at CBS, well, the phones had already lit up. And since they were in New York at the time broadcasting this, and they said that the event, the Martian landing, was in Grover's Mills, New Jersey, well, the metropolitan area was going berserk. Hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people were convinced that Martians had really landed. They had done their job too well. Now, the next day, Orson Welles, they had a press conference. He was rehearsing a play. He had no idea that it had gone this far. There's newsreel footage, which is fascinating, of him being forced to apologize. And he does so, you know, very intelligently. He says, you know, we never dreamt that, well, yes, he dreamt. He hoped that they would fool people, but he didn't think they would panic.
Right.
He just hoped they would get into the spirit of, you know, a Halloween Eve masquerade, whatever you want to call it, a charade of this great, you know, great story.
Today, 59 years later, we hear stories of suicides going on.
I don't know if there was that or not. I haven't researched that too intensely to find out what the response was, but you can look at newspapers and magazines of the day, and you know that people were plenty scared. A lot of them were.
Well, it's, you know, if you listen to the original broadcast or if you read the words, the story of the War of the Worlds is something that we all know. But what is, even as Leonard just recounted, what makes this such a history-making event is what took place when it was broadcast live to America. And the way that they reacted and what took place. As again, that was a great story. I didn't know a lot of those details I'd never heard before.
Well, that's why you'll have to read my book.
Check it out.
And the book is called Great American Broadcast, Leonard Maltin, a celebration of radio's golden age.
Leonard, we have assembled some truly great talent for this.
You sure have.
Mr. Paul Sorvino is going to be in this. William Shatner is here.
And William Shatner has been working lately in a number of really interesting radio projects, including several written by one of the greatest of all radio writer and directors, Norman Corwin. He was called, some people call him the poet laureate of radio. A brilliant man who's in his upper 80s and is still just as brilliant, just as creative as ever. And I was here in this very museum during the past year when he wrote a new play for National Public Radio about a debate among Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and Alexander Hamilton. It never took place in real life, but he used their real words, and he had a moderator. And the four people who played these roles were Mr. Shatner, Lloyd Bridges, Jack Lemmon, and Martin Landau.
Whoa.
Now, why would all this high-powered talent make themselves available to do something like this? Because actors love working on radio, and because Norman Corwin is such an incredible guy that no one could resist working with him, or no one would ever turn down working with him.
Well,
so it's still going on. So radio's not dead, and you guys are helping to keep, you know, the radio drama alive and the spirit of it. And my book, by the way, comes with a CD. You can clip off a little coupon and sent for a free CD where we give you 3 complete shows. So if you haven't really experienced this, you can. And so I've become a proselytizer for radio, drama, and comedy. It's
You must love this place, the Museum of
it's
Television
wonderful
and
that
Radio.
it's here, of course. I mean, it's been in New York for a number of years. The one here in Beverly Hills is just a year old. There's this great listening room that we're in where you can come and listen to great radio. You don't have to, if you can't afford to buy the tapes, there are clubs you can join. You can borrow them for free. Local libraries have them. KNX runs 2 old-time shows every night at 9 o'clock. Or you can come here to the museum, and they have this beautiful listening room, and you can listen to great stuff.
All right, well, Leonard, you have a good-sized part in the War of the Worlds, so don't screw it up.
I'm going to try my darndest.
All right, so are we.
I'm going to try my darndest.
We have Mr. Al, Pam Baker. They've worked so very hard at making sure this was as near and close to the original broadcast as we can. The microphones are as they are. Foley is right there. It's going to be live, and we just can't wait. We're buzzed about the chance of broadcasting this.
I'll tell you an interesting story. One of the people I interviewed was one of Orson Welles' closest associates, a man named Richard Wilson, passed away a few years ago. He was kind of Orson's helper, jack-of-all-trades associate. He would do anything. He thought Orson was the greatest, and he would do anything Orson needed him to do. He had a transcription disc of a dress rehearsal for this show, and of course they used to rehearse a lot more than we have this morning. And
as in nil.
That's right. They had a dress rehearsal, and he says on the dress rehearsal you can overhear Orson saying, Mr. Welles saying to John Houseman, "They'll never buy this." So
they did.
Well, they did. Yeah. The other story that's told about the original broadcast is they were on opposite Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy on the Chase and Sanborn show, and that was like one of the most popular shows on the air.
Huge.
That was on NBC, and it started at 8 o'clock. But about 8:10 is when Nelson Eddy, the singer, would come on. It would open with a skit with Edgar and Charlie.
And everybody wanted to hear that.
Everybody wanted to hear that. But this is the days before remote controls, but still, when Nelson Eddy would come on with his baritone singing, some people would tune out. And they'd go to the radio dial and see what else was on. So a lot of people came to War of the Worlds late.
And didn't hear the opening announcement.
That's right.
And bought it. All right. Leonard, thank you for coming in. We look forward to your part and the entire play.
So, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the book, and I commend you for doing this, and I hope you keep doing it for years to come.
Oh, thank you. We want to.
Market Brown Radio program at the Museum of Television and Radio. Mr. William Shatner has sat down at this chair, and this is not the first time we've been in the same room together. No, sir. Not only has he done this broadcast on several occasions, we have worked with him. He has directed our thespian talents there in the...
Say ethereal.
Why did you... why did you just wince when we said thespian talents?
Well, I don't know what the word thespian means. That's so funny. When you said it, you had marked beside the word ethereal, serial, so you knew how to say it.
Yes.
Because those words, as you're reading the words, they come up. And on radio, you're reading the word. Today, this morning, is really exciting because you handed us our scripts of, an hour-and-a-half show?
Right.
And everybody's looking at it for the first time. I'm looking through the glass to see Paul Sorvino looking, my God, I haven't seen the script. I'm valiantly turning the pages because I don't know, what I'm going to say next. So you come across the word ethereal, and on a live broadcast, how did you say it when you?
Well, at first I was just going ethereal. And I've never seen the word in my life. I have no clue what it is, and I ran across it, and I go, you know what? I should ask about this because I'm going to have to read this on the air. You may hear a lot of this. And they were moving up through the...
Oh, bad sound guy. You blame it on the sound guy. Well, welcome back, William.
Oh, man, it's fun. And thanks for inviting me. And I'm just so glad to be here. You were talking about Norman Corwin. And just briefly, an amusing story that happened. I've known Norman for a long, long time. I came out of radio in Canada, in Montreal. I put myself through college on radio.
Were you a jock?
No, on radio drama, which was very big in Canada at the time, and I mean everything was radio drama because we were somewhat behind technically from the States, and so radio lasted a lot longer in Canada than it did. So I was one of the radio figures in Canada as a young man. Came down here, I had a wealth of radio experience that other actors my age hadn't had. So I came in contact with Norman Corwin. Norman Corwin and I became great friends, and he began to write things. I began to do a lot of things for him. And one day he calls me and he says, "Look, the Channel 6, the educational channel it wants to do a look back at radio in the 40s, and I've assembled as many radio actors as I can. Will you come and play the parts that Orson Welles?" And I had been playing Orson Welles parts for him. I was a latter-day Orson Welles for him, for Norman Corwin. So we appear at one of the radio stations to do a simulated radio show. Now, the radio, the microphones are connected to nothing. This is simulation of what it was like to do radio, and there's 3 cameras filming us for a retrospective for television.
Sure.
Okay, they're filming us for television, simulating a radio show. This is live now, but this is as though the cables weren't connected to anything. So the actors, who are all old radio actors, are now sitting around, and Norman Corwin's directing us, as he must have 20, 30 years prior.
Sure.
And we get about 10 minutes into it, and the director of the television says, "It's cut, we have to reload the cameras." So all the actors stop, and we wait until they reload the cameras, and they start to film again. By the second time the director of the television show said cut, the radio actors didn't really cut. We were now beginning to get so into the radio broadcast that the idea that this was only for television began to escape us, and we began to do a radio show, and now the TV didn't matter. Well, to cut the story short, TV people, finally after an hour, had had enough.
Right.
They packed up and left. The radio actors now, somehow 3 o'clock in the afternoon was like coming, and it was like that was the radio. I don't know where that came from, but we became excited, like we are now, to do a live radio. Well, it wasn't live. We were in a dead studio. We had forgotten completely that it was for television, and all the old radio actors, like some old horse that was retired, now racing again. All those old...
rekindle those fires.
Exactly. And it was hysterical.
Well, today it absolutely has an energy there. As William said, everybody has arrived and they're reading through their scripts. And as you
For the first time?
Yeah, for the first time, many of them. And as you walk through this room, there's the mumbling and the preparing and the whatevers. And then the studio, not 50 feet from here, is humming, ready for this broadcast. And this is going to be, if nothing else, this is going to be a blast to do. And you're going to get a chance to listen to what will start out slow, probably. And as we all read our scripts and go through the lines, it's going to start an entity of its own and will become a living, breathing thing.
And actually, this particular play, radio play, was designed that way, to start off slow. Like you're listening to just a radio in 1930.
And the fact that they were able to simulate reality to such a degree, and people were so tuned into radio at that time, they got their news from radio. So when they said, "I see something over there, just over there,"
oh my God,
oh my God,
check it out. Well, William, for you to lend your talents to us and do this, not only does it mean a great deal to us, but it helps the gift that we're offering to our listeners. This is our Halloween gift to them, and because of the fact that you've been kind enough to do this for a very low fee of $10,000, very kind of you.
I didn't know that.
Oh, then you're not.
I think he bought it.
We win. Well, it is kind of scary that he paid us to be on his TV show, but we're not paying him to be on our radio show.
I have you in my pocket.
We owe you some.
All right, listen, we'll let you go back and start to read. We're going to continue the broadcast, and we'll see you in the room in about 20 minutes.
Looking forward to it.
Sitting with us now is Paul Sorvino. He's been on the show about two, 3 times. He's going to be playing the Orson Welles parts for the broadcast today of the War of the Worlds. Hello, Paul.
Hello, how are you? It's perfect because I have a nice chest cold. The better to imitate Orson, although I'm not going to imitate him. The wings of man.
Being that this is, hey, that's really good.
Thanks.
Now, being that this is Halloween, I mean, this is October 31st, you got to give us some Igor. Because every time you come on, you give us a little Igor. Just throw us a taste of that right here, right now.
They say I killed 5 men. They say they tried to hang Igor, but Igor lived. Igor all right.
Now, Igor, I believe, is living with another man, is he not?
Yes, he is.
That's what I thought.
He ran off with him, and it was not my fault. I was good to him. I really was. My girlfriend's not living.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, golly, no.
Well, happy Halloween.
Well, what happened?
Thank you.
Was it hard to see Igor naked?
Well, it's the kind of thing you really can't talk about on radio because You have to imagine it, and the imagination is so powerful here. Is Bill Shatner here yet?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, because we go back a long time.
Do you?
Oh, yes, he won't tell you that. And he's a big macho guy, Captain Kirk, and all that stuff. But we all know what it really is. He rides the horses, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? A big, powerful beast between his legs, Oh. Yeah, well, figure it out, okay, Billy?
Already have. Well, that's well stated.
Saddle up, you stallion.
Saddle up.
All right.
Oh, back in the saddle again.
Oh. Well, again, first, thank you for doing this for us.
Let me ask you a question, pal.
Yes, you
I
go.
don't like them guys. I give them the knuckle sandwich, but I slept with a lot of them.
With the musical guys.
My God.
Yeah.
Did we mention Paul Sorvino's here?
Yes, sir.
Paul Sorvino's in the room.
Or somebody like him, or someone impersonating him.
Listen, Paul, you
Yes.
know, for the fact that you would offer up your abilities to something like this, is this the first in a while for you? For
Never did anything like this before.
Really?
Reason being, like you guys a lot told me Bill Shatner would be here. I said, this I got to do. Bill and I have never worked with one another, but I have been a Bill Shatner fan for 30 years. And, I mean, going back to, like, he did a great Twilight Zone, if I don't...
Oh,
Yeah,
you know, we
a
didn't
great
even
one.
mention that, too.
Oh, man.
Did two of them.
If
Yeah,
you
and
you get a chance for a Halloween offering, go pick up a copy of Mr. Shatner's Twilight Zone, where he was on the airplane and and he's freaking out and the monsters. I don't know.
Tremendous.
And another one dealt with a little devil fortune-telling thing at a diner table.
You know what it is about Bill? There's a lot of good actors and all of that, but very few actors have personality, and very few actors have style. The thing that Bill Shatner is as an actor is he's extraordinarily stylistic and yet a terrific actor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, one of the things I like most
and I
about trying to...
really would like to tell you that 400 people, bones. I'm just a country doctor,
Bones.
Jim.
Both
Is
of you-
that, Jim?
Trying to-
Sensors indicate, Captain. Locked in on course, Captain. My brother Pavel. What? Oh, sorry. I got carried away to a spaceship somewhere.
Well, the greatest thing about booking both of you, one would say, well, I won't do it unless you know...
Well, it kind of happened that way, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was like asking mom and dad if you could stay overnight with somebody. Go ask your mother. Go ask your father.
Yeah. I just asked the guy next door.
Did you?
Yeah. I said, can we stay overnight together?
Well,
He said
luckily,
yes.
he did say yes, and we're not that far away. We're about 10 minutes away from starting this
man.
thing up. Yeah.
This is it.
Now, as you hear the words pour forth from your radios, this, in many cases, will be the first time the actors have actually read them. So it should be an interesting process how this is going to go.
Well, that's the way it happened in the old days.
Yeah.
They picked up the script and went. I did a good bit of commercial, in front of microphone stuff 25,
Voiceover.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
Lots of that. And, sometimes it's not really this. It was not dramatic stuff like this. But it was, you get to you pick it up and you go,
Well, what's unique about this particular thing, as we've talked about, is not so much the radio play itself, but what this thing did to America, the way people bought into this deal. And so we're going to present this word for word pretty much as the way that we
Yeah,
received
the date
it.
was, what was the date again?
October 30th, Mr. Al?
59 years
39?
ago. Yeah,
39?
38.
38.
1938.
59 years ago.
So we're close. And Paul, thank you for doing it.
I'm leaving now. This was my interview. This was it.
We're about
Thanks,
to
guys.
we're taking a break and we're
You know,
doing
Well,
it.
that's great, guys, but I can't stay.
His houseboy Sandy's going to be doing the part.
Sandy, come here. Come here, Sandy.
Come here.
Hi, I'm Sandy.
Oh, is it
I'm
you
going to
kidding?
read what Paul was going to read.
Yes, Sandy. Now, you take care of Paul? You're his
Yes,
houseboy?
I take care of him.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Hey, Paul Moyer, step in for just a second.
I'm out of here.
All right,
Thank you, Paul.
We're very close to leaving this small studio ourselves. Paul Moyer.
Hi, Paul.
Hey.
Paul Moyer.
You get away from me. The last time you touched me, you blew out my knee.
We were playing
Just get away
basketball.
from me.
Paul and I were playing basketball, man, and I didn't touch you. You fell back, man.
That's
You
a lie,
blamed
dude.
me
I got
forever.
the tape to prove it. You're going to hear from my attorney. We're going all the
Couldn't
way.
play golf for 2 years.
Hey,
How is your golf game?
pretty good.
Yeah? You
Yeah.
out there swinging?
That's the only thing I can do now with the knees, play golf. Thanks, Steve. But it's fine. It's
Wow.
no,
right,
it's.
And Paul, this is going to be a stretch for you because today you're going to be playing a reporter.
Let me tell you something. I walked in here this morning and I saw William Shatner and Paul Sorvino reading their scripts, and I said, "What am I doing here?" I mean, this is.
I love the fact he read through it a couple times and he looks at me and goes, I'm going to screw it up.
There's a couple of names in there that there's no way. Not at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Now, if you're listening here in Los Angeles, you need no introduction. But if you don't, Paul Moyer is one of the biggest names in local news. He has paid millions and millions. Huge cash this guy pulls down.
How are you pulling down?
You guys.
He's up around 25, 30 million a year.
Yeah, that's pretty close. But anyway, you could.
Wow. You got to come over.
All right, so now we are literally about to move into the room. And where's Colleen? Is she here yet?
She's a few minutes away. She just called.
Okay.
Colleen, listen, if you're stuck on Coldwater, make a left, come on down the canyon, get here. Let's go.
If she can't show, I think Paul Sorvino can pretty much do her part.
As Igor.
He can do all our parts. Yeah, there's no question about that.
All right.
Wishy, like I like.
Well, listen, Paul, thank you for doing this. And
I wouldn't miss it.
It's been a little too long since we've spoken and seen each other.
We have, it's been about 5 years, and we should get together and maybe do a little 3-point competition this time, something like that.
Oh, just shooting around?
Just shooting around, guy.
Yeah.
No physical contact. We don't need that anymore. We're older now. We don't need that.
All right, we're going to play You Can't Win. We invite you to call right now, 1-800-955-5567. Stand by.
Igor. Igor with the hump.
Sorvino's coming through the glass.
He's banging on the wall. He's coming in.
The hump has changed positions, we see.
So get ready. We're going to play You Can't
Paul,
Win.
did you bring your daughter? I'm sorry.
Hey, man.
All of a sudden, he's daddy and pissed. All right, so call now for You Can't Win. We'll play and then begin the War of the Worlds on the Mark and Brian radio program from the Museum of Television and Radio. We're back in a few. We'll try our best to present to you an idea of what it is that we're looking at. We are standing on a beautiful stage in a 150-seat theater here at the museum. In front of us are the Signet Sound Deluxe Foley people, and there are 5 or 6 of them with keyboards and samplers and computers and all that. Good morning, guys and ladies. Thank you for coming.
All graduates from ITT.
We are standing on the stage facing the audience, and all of the following people that we're going to introduce to you are standing with us. To our immediate right is Mr. Paul Sorvino.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. You are taller than I thought.
Thank you.
And blonder.
Hey, why don't you make a daughter
Thank
comment?
God for Clairol.
Standing next to Paul Sorvino, actually now standing, was sitting, a very good friend of the program. Please welcome William Shatner.
Next to him, you'll know him from Entertainment Tonight and his own television programs over the years, Mr. Leonard Maltin.
One of the most respected and well-known news anchors here in Los Angeles, Paul Moyer.
And having just arrived in the nick of time, being stuck in cold water traffic, Colleen Williams.
Hi, Colleen.
And the gentleman you just heard doing Little Roger Rabbit, this is the biggest working voice in the business, Mr. Jess Harnell.
And, of course, the glue, the epoxy, the caulk
The huge caulk of the show.
of the entire broadcast. My partner, Mark Thompson, and myself, Brian Phelps. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, so. The caulk.
The big. All right. There's best, we don't have to take a break, so the only way we know to do it is just to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, our Halloween gift to you and to those of you listening, this is the War of the Worlds.